You know it's true, everything I do it for you. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. Mr. Director, there's been a dialogue recently on this discussion on the right. Is there anti-Semitism? Are some hosts interviewing people who should not necessarily be interviewed? Well, I have a hot take on this. And this is perhaps the only time your humble correspondent will be discussing it because first and foremost, I believe it divides this conservative MAGA America First movement in such a way that's a gift to Democrats and the very far left and the communists, the Islamists, the secular humanists, the globalists who seek to destroy this nation and ultimately our constitutional republic. But first and foremost, Tucker Carlson has every right to interview anyone he wishes to interview. And with that, you could still disagree with a person like Nick Fuentes. Within journalism, within the parameters of this discussion, within freedom of speech and what we do as columnists, journalists, opinion editorials, and writers, everyone in this vast space known as media, whether it's the new media to legacy, you might come across the opportunity to interview someone whom you disagree with. And that happened recently. No one else was more insulting towards Tucker's family than that of Nick Fuentes. And Tucker, for whatever reason, chose to engage in this dialogue. Megyn Kelly, to her credit, on this tour she's attending, which I recently viewed and enjoyed with guests like Marjorie Taylor Greene to Adam Carolla, John Rich, amongst Charles Cook and Rich Lowry of the National Review, a whole host of people from different arenas in American life. Had a wonderful time with Miss Kelly outside of Atlanta last weekend, where she took questions from the audience, asking those who may disagree with her, just as Charlie Kirk did at these Turning Point events. Dialogue and more free speech leads to a more civil society, period. Now back to Mr. Fuentes, because I saw him in action dating back to 2017. I witnessed at student action summits in West Palm Beach, Florida, this individual who would run up to Ben Shapiro and his family and attack them for being Jewish with anti-Semitic tropes that were literally disgusting to watch, to the point of security having to be involved, to the point of other Turning Point USA members and staff saying, knock it off. They're individuals of his alt-right groypers, whatever they want to call themselves, whom I believe are not conservatives nor part of this conservative MAGA America First movement, but those who believe in deep socialist ties. These individuals would film us at CPACs to other conferences and just cuss us out for no apparent reason other than they either did not have a press pass or could not gain access or were unwilling to go in dialogue and have discussion with those within the conservative movement. So you take that for what it's worth. I've witnessed it on the ground throughout my career. So I detest his opinions, but regardless of that, he has a right to hold those opinions, and Tucker has every right to interview the individual. At the same time, it does not mean Tucker Carlson is somehow an agent for Qatar or anti-Semitic or wanting to promote the ideas of Mr. Fuentes. And to her credit, Megyn Kelly, having both Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson on her tour, I believe back-to-back days, to explain their sides of this debate, and both considering one another, still friends and able to dialogue and text, although it's been quiet of recent, to my understanding. Now, the real problem is on Sunday's show of Mark Levin, someone who I agree with 90% of the time. In fact, I still consider him, as Sean Hannity mentions him, the great one because of his knowledge and because of his ability to be unafraid, speaking truth to power. But I watched as he interviewed Senator Ted Cruz, and this narrative became or surrounded calling Tucker, without mentioning his name, someone who's part of this new fascism or alt-right movement, or wanting to be a soundpiece for Muslim or Arab nations against the state of Israel. And in some way, in some turn, this growth of anti-Semitism on the right, according to Mark Levin and according to Senator Ted Cruz. Now, I feel as if Senator Cruz joined Mark Levin in order to somewhat defend his stance, given that Tucker Carlson embarrassed him in their recent interview. But the good senator from Texas, whom I agree with, again, probably more than 90% of the time, can defend his own position on that. But I'd like to echo the words of Megyn Kelly, who was very clear on this during her tour, that it's a mistake for the right and the conservative movement as we know it to divulge into this name-calling of fascist and Hitler-esque. It's terrible, as Tucker and Ben and Megyn herself, among others, have had countless threats on their lives. I'm sure Mr. Levin and his family as well. So we have to remain united in all of this. It's also true that you can criticize the state of Israel and their government and not be an anti-Semite. So I find myself really in the middle of where I guess Ben Shapiro would be, Mark Levin would be, and ultimately where Tucker Carlson is. It's okay to dialogue and discuss these things. We are the big tent movement. This conservative MAGA, America First agenda is that. And we are better than the far left trope and rhetoric that we find almost on a daily basis that inspires people to take violent action against their fellow man. We cannot fall into that pattern. And I'd like to hear what you have to say, the good viewers of the Voice of Reason and Right Side Broadcasting Network. You can always write in to RSBN at feedback@rsbn.tv. Where are you on this issue? I'm very curious as to where you stand as we move into the 2026 midterms and celebrate and dialogue with those who are fortunate enough, as yours truly, to get to speak their mind behind a microphone. And this Veterans Day week, we celebrate that in the highest way, that these rights defended by ultimately the American soldier. It's them, not the politician, not the journalist, not anyone in American life who provides that fabric of freedom and liberty, other than those who volunteer and put on that uniform to protect the United States of America. We have a great show tonight. Mr. Nick Fondacaro, an associate editor at Newsbusters at the Media Research Center, divulging and diving into the issues of the day. We're also joined by a Gen Z conservative, Georgia Morgan, who gives her take on recent events, including what's happening with Turning Point USA and the conclusion of that tour at UC Berkeley, where we saw once again the true fascists, who call themselves anti-fascists, Antifa for short, who were creating violence once again on that campus. And the irony of it, given the fact that the free speech movement, really born in the modern sense in the 1960s at UC Berkeley, well, it's gone off the rails there. But even with that happening, Turning Point USA having a peaceful and patriotic rally with actor and comedian Rob Schneider to close out the Turning Point tour. We're happy to have you here on the Voice of Reason as we dive into it tonight, November 13th, 2025. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. It's Nick Fondacaro. He's the associate editor for Newsbusters. Nick, tell us a lot that's happening right now, because I feel with the holidays coming up, people somewhat turn off the news, turn off the politics inside and outside the Beltway. They turn on those Hallmark movies. What has been that big story for you this year, especially the one to watch? Is it the shutdown? Is it President Trump ending all of these wars? Is it the tariffs? What say you going into the midterms of 2026?
Yeah, obviously, right now, what's happening, especially this time of year, with a lot of concern for a lot of people, was the government shutdown and the SNAP benefits and the government workers getting paid. Basically, what we've been seeing is the liberal media now suddenly turning on Democrats to let people know that they were in charge of the shutdown this entire time. So basically, what we were seeing through the month of October was that the liberal media, the networks ABC, CBS, and NBC, gave a total of 83 positive statements about Democrats during the shutdown, only 12 for Republicans. And they basically, in that time, were only showing that the Democrats were routinely shielded from blame, and they were portrayed as these humanitarian saviors that were trying desperately to help the average working person. But basically, now that those 8 Democrats sort of shifted and came across the aisle, the jig was up, and basically the liberal media were able to sort of turn on the Democrats to sort of punish them for going to bat for them during all this.
It really seems as if their base, it's so radical, as House Speaker Mike Johnson was mentioning with Republican leadership during this 41-day shutdown, as it's really ongoing until the House gives their own version of what the Senate edited ultimately to the president's desk. But do you find it that they will have troubles in the midterms potentially with their own base? Because as they see it, Chuck Schumer has not led well.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some uptick in like Democratic infighting about this, especially that we're seeing that so many of them are being so public about it. And just the other day on The View, Sonny Hostin was basically shouting and screaming at John Fetterman, like on air, about how he turned his back on the Democrats and basically harmed and threw out all of the political points that they had accumulated and the political victory from the election in the beginning of November. So basically, the View, it tends to be sort of the liberal media's anger translator a little bit, and sort of saying the things that they don't want to say on air a lot of times, and basically sort of the liberal media now is upset that, and they sort of view the entire government shutdown as just leverage and political point gaining for the Democrats, which is kind of sick considering how many people it hurt. So basically, they're upset about that, and now the liberal media is going at Democrats. So we'll see how the media portrays them going forward, although this could just be a little bit of a temper tantrum before they sort of settle down and sort of lock in for the midterms.
Now, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna mentioned that House Speaker Mike Johnson has promised her, notifying her that, in fact, the Speaker intends to put a bill forward to ban insider trading, and it's going to be marked up in committee. Is there anything that MRC is tracking with this inside of the Beltway? Because we know it's been a massive problem with the recently announced not re-election of Nancy Pelosi, who's been in Congress for 20 terms. She's the master of it, as former Congressman Matt Gaetz has laid out, but it's really a Republican and Democrat issue. If you're Martha Stewart and a private citizen, you get the ankle bracelet. You go to court. But if you're in Congress, it seems as if you can insider trade.
Yeah, we're not seeing too much about the media talking about that promise right now. We'll see what goes forward if there's a vote on it, because I'm old enough to remember back when Peter Schweizer's books came out and it put a big spotlight on this a few years ago, or a long time ago, under the Obama administration. There was this big publicity push to push legislation that would limit insider trading and all these deals for Congress. And then Congress quietly in the background sort of undid all of that legislation, and the media sort of turned the blind eye to that. So right now we're not seeing anything about the promise or so far anything of that movement once that legislation comes forward, but we'll keep an eye on that definitely going forward, because that is something that both sides of the political aisle would like, some less insider trading from Congress.
Oh, no question about it. So if we see that this moves forward to the president's desk ultimately with the House edits, now that it has passed the Senate after a 41-day shutdown, it goes to January of 2026. How do we avoid hitting this back wall again and having the government up against the ropes if the Democrats seem unwilling to come forward and actually fund the government?
It's going to come down to what House Speaker Johnson and Senator Thune are able to wrangle together with the caucus and see if they can hold on to those 8 Democrats that came aboard and see if they can work on something in the meantime and see if they can put in a conservative plan, possibly for health care, to undo Obamacare that those 8 Democrats could be comfortable with. And then we're going to see how the media over here at Newsbusters, just to see how the media react to that, especially if they are very adamant that they want to hold on to Obama's legacy and want to just sort of go with the rest of the Democratic Party, and especially if this could be an opportunity for them to continue to lash out at those 8 and try to make hay and try to push for the far left wing to take over the establishment of the party.
And this week is a very special week, Veterans Day, to celebrate. We saw President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary Collins, all at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It's a time to reflect, as this time of year, Armistice Day, as it was originally known, that time to contemplate not only what we're grateful for, but the fact that this nation came from God. And these soldiers, these people who laid down their lives and sacrificed a period of time to serve their country, has led to the careers of you and me and countless others as MRC working overtime to get the real story out there. Without the American soldier, there's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of religion. So, Nick, some of your thoughts on this week as we celebrate the American soldier.
Yeah, I like to keep them like in my thoughts and prayers constantly, and just sort of like remembering that the media has had this role of they've been fans of the military recently, but we can't forget about the times like back in Vietnam where they portrayed them in very, very horrible ways, and when they came home they were spit on, degraded. And we sort of see that a little bit now where they take that animosity towards authority and direct it towards ICE, direct it towards the National Guard now. You have different organizations like ABC News and The View sort of claiming that the National Guard is going to help steal elections. And they were also sort of casting doubt on whether or not the Army and President Trump shared a birthday, and all the heinous things they were saying about like the Army going to be goose strutting through DC for just to make dictator Trump look good. So like in a way they have like this sort of negative animosity percolating underneath all of their pleasantries now, or their kind words now, just crocodile tears for the military. But basically what we're seeing is hopefully the media sort of stick to keeping the military faithful and positive.
Absolutely. And we've seen with these big cities with Mayor Brandon Johnson now trying to get the UN involved in the city of Chicago as those ICE agents working overtime to create safety in the second city. Thank you to Nick Fondacaro joining us, the associate editor at Newsbusters on The Voice of Reason. Come back and see us again very soon.
Thanks for having me.
Our thanks again to the Media Research Center, Newsbusters, very own Nick Fondacaro, breaking down all of the news this week as associate editor at that fine organization. We also had the opportunity to speak with Georgia Morgan, a Gen Z conservative. You could find her at The Blonde Conservative on Instagram, at Blonde Conservative on TikTok as well. Someone unafraid of diving into the culture war in 2025. Welcome for the first time to The Voice of Reason. It's Georgia Morgan, a Gen Z conservative. I've been wanting to talk to Gen Zers, Georgia, because you are this new group of folks that seems to be on the right side of history.
Yes, definitely.
And
there aren't many of us.
Right. Yeah. It's so refreshing. But I argue sometimes when I graduated college, dating myself in the millennial generation, although we're finally getting more conservative, I really felt outnumbered.
I feel the same way. It feels like there's not many of us, but I find some hope from some of the messages I get. I get a lot of Gen Z messages, so it's definitely a little bit helpful.
Yes. And is it really like social media as a Turning Point USA that's brought all of you together? Perhaps it's the idea of affordability. We know now it's harder for anyone to really purchase that first home. They're now saying on average, we're looking at the age of 40 for the first time for people to purchase their home in America.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially in like major cities. I'm in Baltimore, so we definitely feel that. We feel the skyrocketing of taxes and things like that, especially being in a Democratic state. So it's definitely harder to buy a home here.
And are you finding anything that's different with ICE being involved in these major cities? Has Baltimore gotten safer over time, or is there still a lot of problems given the Democrat run cities in deep blue Baltimore?
I don't feel like Baltimore has felt safer. I don't know if it ever will feel safer. I do have some friends that work with ICE, and they have been successfully getting a lot of illegal immigrants out of the country, out of the state, which is amazing. But I don't feel like it will ever be secure in a democratic place like Baltimore, just because there are so many of these people. It's like, where do you even start?
Right. And that's something that we saw with the auto pen administration from last year, bringing in countless illegal aliens. Now, we are in the midst of this government shutdown. Seems as if we're coming to an end with it, but we do know that it's been a big week of news from the Trump pardons of those alternative electors. And of course, the president had appointed Christopher Wray back in the first term, but he launched this Arctic frost on all these people that spied on United States senators, 9 Republican senators from the last count, their colleagues, and even potentially people like you and me. And we know this is all the ripple effect from the Patriot Act all those years ago. But how are you so brave to be a Gen Z conservative, knowing that the government, like Senator Chuck Schumer put it years ago, might have a way at getting at you 6 ways from Sunday?
So it's actually crazy that you brought this up because I got a notification on my Instagram. You might have seen it. A sophisticated attacker has been trying to get a hold of my account. So it's crazy because I'm blowing up so quickly. I gained 100,000 followers within a span of a month. So I think that somebody is on to me and trying to shut my account down. So I definitely feel the attack on conservatives, especially right now. So that's funny that you brought that up.
Oh, it's so interesting. Can you give us any secrets to the trade of getting more followers? Because clearly, someone, perhaps in those surveillance corners, like you mentioned, might not be thrilled that you actually have some influence and you're able to help mobilize your fellow generation.
I don't have any tips on that. But ever since Charlie Kirk passed, I've been posting a lot and trying to gain a lot of traction from Gen Z because they are the up and coming generation of voters and also the voters after them that are younger than them. I think it might be Gen Alpha, which I'm definitely worried about that generation. Um, but I'm definitely worried about how the voters after my generation are going to be because I see them so brainwashed now. And it's extremely concerning because they are just for anybody who is not white, who is not MAGA, which is extremely concerning.
Well, in essence, it's this reverse discrimination we're seeing, in a
Yes.
sense, in 2025, which is rather
Yes.
bizarre. And, I'm someone who I follow in the footsteps of a dear friend, Tucker Carlson. The idea that if
Yes.
you hate someone based on their appearance or based on their religious or philosophical background, well, it's probably more of something you have to look at your own heart about. And it
Yeah.
seemed to really cross all of these different boundaries and lines, but that line drawn in the sand, it seems to be much more of a concern on the far left because we saw it at Berkeley this week, the last stop of the
Yes.
Turning Point tour taking place, where Antifa, once again, the so-called anti-fascists, actually using fascist tactics because they don't want you to speak your piece peacefully and patriotically.
Yeah. Those people that claim to be the tolerant left, they are so violent and they are so extreme, and they call us extreme, which is crazy because we are the people trying to have conversations like Charlie Kirk. We're giving these people a platform to speak, and they are constantly attacking us, whether it's on social media or if it's physically. I mean, you see them at these turning point events, and they are just attacking anybody who is there in support of Charlie Kirk or Turning Point or even in support of ICE or police officers. It's insane.
It really is. It's something to watch as we go into the 2026 midterms. And Georgia, being a Gen Z conservative like you are, what are you most looking forward to in these midterms? Do you have a message out there for people that were thrilled from, let's say, the last 3 elections of President Trump being on the ballot, but of course, important matters are still on the top of the ballot, even though his name is not necessarily going to physically be present?
Yeah, so I would just hope that people will vote with logic and not emotion, like I've been speaking. I see a lot of women, especially Gen Z, voting with emotion. Like I said, non-white, non-MAGA. As long as they're not Republican, they're voting for them. And I just wish that people would look at policies instead of what these people look like and what they identify as far as they're Republican or Democratic.
Do you think there's a reason we would call it tribalism, but for those who are not necessarily of the political ilk or not paying attention like we are on a daily basis, hour by hour? I'm not sure about you exactly, although we've been talking for some time now. I'm obsessed with this stuff. I'm obsessed with politics, history, the culture, but it seems as if there's with younger people at times, they get sucked into a vortex of, like you mentioned, the feelings over fact. But do you think there's a reason that some of that tribalism doesn't exist? Is it from the college campuses, or is it from certain associations when they are in their younger years?
I think it has to do with a lot of things. I think it has to do with them going to college. I see a lot more of college kids who are more liberal than anything because they're just so brainwashed. One of my best friends, she went to college and she said it was terrible. Her experience, it was once they found out she was a conservative, they told her to kill herself. They told her they hated her. She was a disgrace. That is what we are seeing. And it's like, these people can't respect having a different opinion. If you don't agree with them, they are automatically like shutting you down instead of why do you think that? Why do you see things from the side that you see them on? They're not having conversations like we are, and colleges are one of the most brainwashing places, I would say, as far as turning these kids against having an open mind and an open opinion.
Well, Georgia, I admire you for not only coming on the Voice of Reason, but for standing strong and communicating over the social media apps, because that's what's really influencing people in this day and age. Where can people find you as you're out there fighting the good fight?
I'm on Instagram, the Blonde Conservative, and I'm also on TikTok. It's just Blonde Conservative.
Oh, right. Well, please come back and visit us again. It's Georgia
Definitely.
Morgan, a Gen Z conservative on the Voice of Reason. Good to hear the voices of young people out there who are unafraid like Georgia. We'll see you again very soon.
Thank you. Bye.
On September 23rd of 1986, by the President of the United States of America proclamation, this, of course, during the 40th presidency of Ronald Wilson Reagan, Veterans Day gives all Americans a special opportunity to pay tribute to all those men and women who, throughout our history, have left their homes and loved ones to serve their country. Their willingness to give freely and unselfishly of themselves, even their lives, in defense of our democratic principles, has given our great country the security we enjoy today. From Valley Forge to Vietnam, through war and peace, valiant patriotic Americans have answered the call, serving with honor and fidelity. On this special day, our hearts and thoughts turn to all the nation's veterans. Let us reflect on the great achievements of those whose sacrifices preserved our freedom and our way of life. With a spirit of pride and gratitude, let us recall their heroic accomplishments and thank them for their unselfish devotion to duty. They are indeed worthy of the solemn tribute of a grateful nation. I invite all Americans to join me in observing Veterans Day through appropriate ceremonies, activities, and commemorations on November 11th. And in order that we may pay fitting homage to those men and women who have proudly served in our armed forces, the Congress has provided us that November 11th of each year shall be set aside as a legal public holiday to honor America's veterans. Now, therefore, I, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America, do do hereby proclaim Tuesday, November 11th, 1986, as Veterans Day. I urge all Americans to recognize the valor and sacrifice of our veterans through appropriate public ceremonies and private prayers. I also call upon federal, state, and local government officials to display the flag of the United States of America and to encourage all and participate in patriotic activities throughout the country. I invite the business community, churches, schools, unions, civic and fraternal organizations, and the media to support the national observance with suitable commemorative expressions and programs. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 23rd day of September in the year of our Lord, 1986, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 211th. Ronald Reagan. Always wonderful to commemorate history and that Armistice Day, which was celebrated the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour, and began overseas as the official ending to the Great War, otherwise known as World War I, now turning into Veterans Day. So we hope you've had a wonderful Veterans Day week, and we pray for you and yours, and especially simply say thank you to those who have worn the uniform and continue to defend the United States of America as we reflect upon the winners and losers of the week. The winner is hands down, from my opening monologue, Megyn Kelly. Continuing in Charlie Kirk's pursuit of free speech, of dialogue, of bringing all different people together. And it was a joy to be with family and friends this past weekend in Atlanta, Georgia, Duluth to be specific, at the Gas South Arena, right outside of that fine city, to celebrate an evening of dialogue, discussion, and special guests from Charles Cook to Rich Lowry of the National Review, John Rich, the great country music superstar, Marjorie Taylor Greene of the 14th District of Georgia, the congresswoman who has been very outspoken, doing the media circuits herself, and Adam Carolla, who was quite a slice, speaking to the fact that you could still have fun, still be a comedian, and still have these opinions, and still have a positive friendship with Jimmy Kimmel, whom he used to work with, whom Jimmy helped him get his break in radio. So that was an interesting background and story. And Adam, with many laughs, brought us through how you can remain friends even if you disagree. The loser this week has to be No Hips Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, who so desperately wants to be Speaker. He tried to whip those votes last night, but 6 Democrats joining Republicans for a 220 to 209 vote, H.R. 5371, to reopen the government, and then the president signing that into law. But we reface this potential shutdown in January of 2026. We will watch closely how this continuing resolution can now turn into dialogue and debate, a reopened government after 43 days. We'll be watching closely here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. This day in history, as we look towards what happened on November 13th. So much happening over the course of history. As we look towards many different dates, it is World Kindness Day, an official observance that encourages people to be kind to one another. Not a bad idea in this day and age. It's another one marking the 317th day of the year. Can you believe how quickly we've gone through 2025? World Kindness Day, in addition to National Indian Pudding Day, an unofficial holiday that recognizes the traditional New England dessert. Do you have a favorite out there as we get ready for the holidays? But every Thursday night, let not your heart be troubled, because it is the voice of reason at 6 o'clock on these gorgeous Thursday evenings in this autumn time of year. We hope that you're faring well with the colder temperatures that came in recently, but so nice to see those crisp leaves falling with all the different colors throughout this great nation of ours. So be sure to catch The Voice of Reason every Thursday night right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. For all of my colleagues at RSBN, stay on that right side of history, and we will see you again very soon.